How to identify space and color complexes. Have you ever wondered how top chess players gain an edge over their opponents? One of the secrets lies in understanding space and color complexes. Let's break down how to identify these concepts in your games. First, let's talk about color complexes. A color complex is a group of squares on the chessboard that share the same color, either light or dark. Recognizing these complexes is essential for strategic play. To identify a color complex, start by observing which squares of a specific color are controlled or contested by your pawns and pieces. For instance, if your pieces dominate the dark squares on one side of the board, you have a dark square complex advantage. On the flip side, if your opponent's pawns are clustered on light squares, they may weaken the dark squares around them. This creates a weak dark square complex you can exploit. Next, let's move on to space advantage. Space refers to how much area your pieces and pawns control. The more space you have, the more mobility your pieces enjoy, and the fewer options your opponent has. When you advance your pawns into your opponent's territory, you effectively control more squares. However, be cautious. Overextending your pawns can lead to vulnerabilities, especially if your opponent controls the opposite color complex. The trick is to balance space control while maintaining a solid pawn structure and good piece coordination. Now, how can you practically identify color complexes and space? Start by examining your pawn structure. Remember, pawns control squares of the color opposite to where they stand. For example, a pawn on a light square controls dark squares diagonally ahead. A strong pawn chain often controls one color complex effectively. Next, identify weak squares. These are squares that cannot be defended by your pawns. They become potential weak squares in that color complex. Also, analyze your piece placement. Bishops are color-bound, meaning they control only one color complex. Knights can jump to both colors but are more effective when supported by control of the color complex. Keep an eye on your opponent's weaknesses. If their pawns are fixed on one color, they likely have weak control over the opposite color complex. Look for opportunities to place your pieces on strong squares within the color complex you control. This will restrict your opponent's piece activity. For example, if you control all dark squares on the queen side, such as c5, d6, e7, and f6, you can limit your opponent's pieces, especially their bishop or knight. If your opponent's dark squared bishop is poorly placed, or if their knights cannot influence dark squares, you may have a strong dark square complex advantage. Using a light squared bishop and knight together can help you cover both color complexes dynamically, increasing your control over space. Dominating a color complex can lead to restricting your opponent's piece mobility and creating strong outposts for your knights or bishops. When planning exchanges, think about which minor pieces, like bishops or knights, are better suited to control or exploit the color complexes in the position. To sum it up, identifying space and color complexes involves assessing pawn structure, piece placement, and the control of color squares. Use this knowledge to maximize your piece activity, limit your opponent, and create strategic advantages on the board.